Welcome to Bird Spray Sports, where we weekly cover Ravens and Orioles news. We're your hosts, TJ and Jared. And in this video, we're going to be doing a recap of our Week 12 win against the New York Jets. We won 23 to 10. It's funny because I always say, oh, we'll win 24 to 10, but we actually ended up winning close 23 to 10. But we won 23 to 10. A very I won't say ugly game because it wasn't 100% ugly, but it was semi-ugly. Just a very grinded out win, and to be honest, just my first thoughts, a segue into that. When I was watching the game, I was like, man, we should be blowing out the Jets right now. Like they are so much of a inferior team than us. They're not a good team. They're not competitive at all. But actually, after the game, when I looked at the Jets' schedule and who they've played thus far, they've actually been in a lot of one-score games, and they've only been blown out twice, and that was against the Cowboys and the Bills actually. And so, taking that in mind, I'm really not surprised, by the way we won. We can't we haven't really been that consistent on offense. We're still kind of figuring that out. We're still kind of working through our offensive line problems, which is, I said in a whole bunch of other problems in itself. I'm just glad that we won in spite of all of those things. And, this is a good Jets defense, even without Quentin Williams and Sauce Gardner. And I'm glad we were able to just pick it up in the second half, kind of start to run the ball a little bit better with Keaton Mitchell at that. And, kind of get the pass game, going a little bit more. That play that we did to Tez Walker, was a really big momentum, getter, and also, got us down the field in scoring range. So I just feel like all in all, it was a weird win, but I'm not surprised, looking at it in hindsight, after the game. And, that kind of brings me to, one of the biggest factors in our win is the defense. That's kind of where I want to start out. And I'll ask you, I feel like the defense really performed well, and Draymond Green was a monster in this game, just the pressures he was getting. He was all over Tyrod Taylor, and just all in the backfield, and that's what we needed from that. And I think that's a good trade that EDC has done. We've been criticizing him a lot this season, but that's actually seeming like a home run so far. I feel like him and Mike Green are kind of having a little duo there. I saw on Twitter, Mike Green asked, what should we name that duo? And he ended up calling themselves Draymond Green. So, hopefully we can have that intensity,
You just do
moving
Mike
forward.
Jones.
That's what a lot of other people said. I said that too, but Draymond Green ain't bad either. So yeah, just both of them having that intensity, it was very important in this game. We're gonna need that, when we face the Joe Burrows and the Aaron Rodgers and the Jordan Loves of the world. And also just, Kai, all over the field, just Zach Orr, the defense really played, lights out, and a shout out to them. I think this is like the fifth straight game we've allowed, less than 20 points. So we're really, getting the job done on the defense. So, what's your thoughts on the defense side of the ball and how they've been playing lately?
Actually, isn't it six straight games? Even though we lost
Yeah,
three?
six straight games. Yeah, yep.
Yeah, so that defense definitely has turned it around. I would really much appreciate it not have to be, moving Kyle Hamilton somewhere, especially where he's been moved to. He's been getting banged up, I think, in the at the line of scrimmage, and trying to rush the passer as well from the inside. I think that he's been getting a little bit banged up from that. It's kind of unfortunate. But I don't know what his status is going to be for Friday or Thursday. I'm sorry, with his ankle injury, I'm not entirely sure. Harbaugh didn't really comment on that today. When is he ever, But yeah, the defense definitely was lights out. It seems like every game they have that one drive where they just kind of get ran down, or they kind of let the passing game kind of get too many passing yards, or they let guys get free, or they'll let Tyrod Taylor, or they'll let the quarterback escape sacks and find guys, whatever. But on my notes here, I have Draymond Jones marked down a lot. I have him marked down at least three or four times. He had two sacks, I believe, in the game, and then he had a pass deflection at the beginning of the second quarter, on third down that ultimately, stalled the Jets' drive. The Jets only really had like two drives, in my opinion. That it was our fourth drive here, and it was the eighth drive that
Brees Hall fumble on.
it was the eighth drive. Yeah, so it was the fourth and eighth drive that they really got their offense going, but they scored the touchdown on the fourth drive, but the Marlon Humphrey stripping the ball on the eighth drive kind of saved. I don't want to say save the game, but you know, I might say it. Might say save the game because we've seen a lot of times where teams come into the bank, that shouldn't win, that get close. They feel like they have momentum, and then the offense does what? They go three and out, or they Lamar throws a pick, or we fumble, or do some dumb shit, and then they get back in the game and they tie the game, or they take the lead, or whatever. We've seen that plenty of times happen, especially in the Harbaugh era. And but shout out to Marlon Humphrey, coming back, from the injury, that surgery. We've been kind of dogging on him this year, on this channel, but I mean, there's one thing you can't, deny about him. He will step up in some moments, and he will make plays. He made a lot of plays for us last year, to kind of, save the defense's ass at points, last season, and obviously he hasn't made as many plays as he did last year, especially interceptions wise. But I mean, these are the moments that we love him for. That he can cause a fumble, or he can strip the ball at a important moment in the game, And I'm gonna just say this: Gilman, he's been a great addition to the defense, but God, he cannot tackle to save his life. Like he's throwing his body out there, he's missing tackles. Like he
He's
cannot.
getting juked. He's getting
Yeah,
his
like
ankles took.
he cannot tackle. That's been his biggest issue in the Raven and Ravens uniform. And I'm like getting to the point where it's like if Brady Washington's good by next week or not, he needs to be starting back there. And they maybe him and Gilman can kind of flip flop, rotation on the field. Kind of have a safety rotation or something. But like I don't know, man. Like, I just like he cannot tackle, man, and that's gonna rear its ugly head. I'll tell you that that'll rear its ugly head in a bad moment. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
If we wind up hosting the wild card game and Buffalo comes here and he misses a tackle on fourth down in the fourth quarter on Josh Allen, I'm gonna be like, I told you, like he's gonna rear its
Oh,
ugly
he's not even
head.
going to make it out the city alive if he does
Yeah,
that.
like no, I know that he's named after a school in Baltimore, but it ain't gonna be pretty, But otherwise than that, Draymond Jones had the sack on, I believe, on third or fourth down, the next drive, and they wound up turning it over. And TJ Tampa, congratulations for getting your first pick. That was I don't didn't receivers for the Jets didn't even think he gave a shit. He just whatever, It's just like the game's over, we're losing. But shout out to the defense. They've been really keeping us in these games these last few weeks.
Yeah, this is funny because I wanted to say, you don't want to bring a Darius Washington back against, Jamar Chase, and then you make him tear his Achilles again.
That's why I said next week, not this week. Maybe not even next week. Let's save him after the Bengals game.
Yeah, but yeah, the defense balled out. Shout out to TJ Tampa, getting his first pick, and I'm very excited to see, how we're going to match up against the Bengals. Obviously last year, as I just mentioned, Jamar Chase, he torched us. That one Thursday night game that was just unacceptable. Like 260 yards receiving, 264 yards receiving. I think he had like two or three touchdowns.
Yeah,
We
it was
need to
bad.
find a way to really bracket that and kind of minimize that. And they have a lot of other good receivers too, which we'll get into at the Bengals pregame. But I'm really curious to see how we approach that, on Thursday, this upcoming Thursday. But moving on to the offense, I just want to say something, and then I'll pass to you. I've been seeing a lot of Lamar just talk recently, and don't get me wrong, Lamar has been playing his best. Certainly not like what we seen last year. He was phenomenal. I've been seeing a lot of people saying Lamar's playing like dog crap, Lamar's playing bad, this and that, right? But context is key. And I feel like a lot of people in their criticisms of Lamar, it's like when you criticize Josh Allen, you include all the context, right? But when they criticize Lamar, it's just that Lamar is bad. But how about Lamar had a hamstring injury for like 3 weeks? He missed 4 games, I think, 3 or 4 games. What about the ankle injury that he's just been going through? The foot injury, the toe injury just today that they said he has. He's been going through a lot of injuries because of the old line. And that's what it all boils down to. You can't say Lamar is washed this year. You can't say Derrick Henry is washed this year because look at week one. They're clearly not washed. It's the offensive line that's making everything seem that way and is making everything just out of funk. And a good example of that is what's going on with the Eagles right now. People are saying Saquon is washed. Their offensive line isn't what it's playing like last year. It's the same thing with the Ravens. So I've been seeing all this talk about Lamar, and it's kind of frustrating because it's just like, for one, it won't get fixed because we won't fix our offensive line. And two, how long can we sustain winning playing this type of ball? I mean, we haven't put together our best ball yet. And in a way, that's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because will we ever get to do that? So that's just, what's really been on my mind about the offense. I really have nothing to say because it's like they didn't really do much besides Tez Walker play that I mentioned. Zay had a couple of nice plays, but the offensive line is what it all boils down to. And, I guess we're due for a good game eventually, but when is it going to come? There's not any margin for error with these upcoming teams you have to play. So, what's your thoughts on the offense or, the offensive line?
Man, you really hit the nail on the head with, when people talk about Lamar. It just seems like when people, discuss, football about Lamar Jackson, it comes from a place of hatred. Like they already have an ulterior agenda or a motive, against Lamar Jackson. Probably mainly coming up from Buffalo, in all seriousness. And I mean, it was disgusting. It's disgusting. And like you said, Lamar definitely isn't playing his best. And then when you do bring up context for Lamar Jackson, when they say you're making excuses, and if we were to clap back with the same stuff with a guy up in Buffalo, you're not using context, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, and it's lazy, and to me, it's there's a level of arrogance in the Ravens front office, to think that, oh, Lamar Jackson will bail us out. Lamar Jackson will do this, that, and the third. Lamar Jackson, we don't need to invest in the trenches in the offensive line because, Lamar, he's going to make plays happen. He's going to make linemen look better than they are. And that's the truth. He definitely will when he's healthy. I mean, we've seen him do it, these last two seasons, 2023, 2024. I mean, not really 2019. I mean, I don't think the 2019 offensive line was like fantastic, but it was good. It was pretty good. It's probably the best Lamar's had, in his tenure with the Ravens, and look what happened then. He was throwing a DoorDash for freaking receivers at that point, and he still won an MVP, and but anyways, there's a level of arrogance, like I was saying, with the Ravens front office to think Lamar can bail them out of everything. And now they can't, because no matter what they say, Lamar is banged up. He may not be injured or he may not be hurting, but he's banged up.
Yeah.
Like adrenaline is a hell of a thing. I'll tell you that. Where you get on that football field or you get on that any field or whatever, that little nagging pain that you have, when I don't know if you fell there, but that nagging pain that you have, that you've had all day, when you get on that field, like sometimes it just goes away, just enough for you to play. Once your adrenaline's done pumping, you kind of feel it again. You got to ice your leg, you got to ice your knee, you got to ice your ankle, your hamstring, whatever you got to do. But I'm telling you, in that game, it won't affect you as much. But you can definitely tell there's a nagging thing with Lamar Jackson and his legs mainly. It's affecting his throws. It's affecting his base when he has to throw. It seems like it's just affecting every part of his game, and it's affecting the Ravens' offense. In all seriousness,
Right.
and I don't know. It's infuriating that this topic has to be discussed about because it should be pretty simple. I'm tired of people, coming to the defense of Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. They'll cry and they'll whine and they'll moan. They'll say, "Oh, they're not building around him. Oh, they're not building enough protection. They're not building the wall for him." And then when it happens to Lamar, nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. And it's just ESPN doesn't care. Fans on Twitter don't care. Fans of other teams don't even care. Which I mean, fans of other teams never gonna care. But there's always discourse on social media, and it's always like I said, if those other three quarterbacks or others have poor offensive lines, well, let's feel bad for them. If Lamar doesn't, then oh fuck him. Like that's what it seems like. And it's gross. In all seriousness. But the Ravens got to stop being arrogant with this offensive line to think that Lamar is only getting older, and if you keep getting him banged up, that elusiveness is just gonna go away. So it should be in your best interest to keep him upright. And keep him in the pocket. And have him. There needs to be secondary to his arm. It seems like they're valuing his running and escapability as a forefront of thing, as priority number one of his skill set, when it's not that. It's his arm. It's his ability to read defenses, his ability to, just absolutely slice through defenses week in and week out. We saw it last year. And that was still with a poor offensive line, but it was better than this year's, which is saying, I don't know how much that's saying, but,
Yeah.
it still was better than last year's. It's better than this year's, whatever. And we saw 41-4. 41 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 4,000 yards. He looked fantastic last year. They need to start building their offense around Lamar Jackson's skill set when it comes to his arm talent, not his legs. And that's where it comes in now. Because with the way the Ravens have been constructed, is the reason they fail in the postseason. Is because they're so quick to abandon what they do great now, which is running the football, and they expect them to go out and throw the ball 40 to 50 times in a playoff game, and it never works. Why? Because you don't do it very often. You don't build around his talents as a passer. You build around his talents as a runner because, we could bring in any fucking running back, and they would still probably get 1,000 yards. Gus Edwards probably would have had 1,000 yards a few seasons ago if they played every single game or whatever. Like any running back can fit in this system. It used to be people think that any quarterback or running quarterback can fit in the system. That's not the case. Lamar Jackson is the system. There's 3 or 4 guys going to his side on a read option play or on whatever if there's any type of option play, they go to his side. They're scared of Lamar Jackson. But they build around that foundation and then expect him to go throw it 40 to 50 times in a playoff game to fucking these 9 receivers, and then you got Mr. Butterfingers and Andrews, and then you never put Likely on the field, so it's like it's very flawed fundamentally, and it's very irritating. And I could really go on longer about this, but I'm yapping too much about it, and the offense is what the offense is going to be, and I don't know where that's going to take us.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. I'm kind of scared, but I'm hopeful that maybe we can get some playoff luck and just win it out. But I just wanted to bring this up in the first place because I'm seeing it's like when Josh Allen got sacked like 8 times against the Texans, all of a sudden everybody wants to start caring about O-line play and the
Yeah,
lack of this
it's
and
no throw the
that.
ball away either. No throw the ball away.
Yeah, yeah, and then you hear guys like Acho, and I can't stand him. But anyway, that's just
He had the nerve to come here and say that, like, oh, Lamar Jackson needs keys to the front office or some bullshit like that because it runs around him. Like, shut the fuck up.
we won
Where,
two
where's your,
Super
where
Bowls
was your
without
fake
Lamar.
ass last year
Yeah,
in the MVP? You wanted to fucking suck Josh Allen's dick last season. You and Dan Orlovsky, you both fucking were sucking his dick last year for the MVP, and all of a sudden it's feel bad for Lamar. Like, whatever, dude.
yeah, yeah. And I hate comments like that because I mean, don't no disrespect to Lamar, we won 2 Super Bowls without him. Like, he is the franchise now, but all time, nah, that's guys like Ray Lewis, Ed Reed. That's their franchise. They're the face all time. But that's another talk for another day. We can look at those stats now before we both get pissed off here
Yeah.
about what these outsiders are saying.
You bring Acho and Dan Orlovsky on here and bitch slap him on streamer. Anyway, you can go ahead and read this.
All right, let's.
Oh, it's not sharing yet. All right, there it goes.
There we go. All right, so all right, Lamar, 13 of 23, 153 yards, his second straight week without a touchdown pass. His 34.3 QBR. That's kind of ugly. Derrick Henry had 21 carries for 64 yards. It was funny because me and you were joking before the game. I remember they were saying he needed like 84 yards to get to
He
10 for
wasn't getting that
11.
shit.
Yeah. And we were like, yeah, but the Ravens O-line don't care about that. They're not gonna let him get that. But he got close. He needs I guess he needs 20 more yards to get
Yeah.
that. So he'll get that on Thursday, hopefully. Yeah, big emphasis on hopefully. Um, Zay Flowers had 2 carries for 11 yards. Also, Derrick Henry had 2 touchdowns. Forgot to mention. Lamar Jackson had 7 carries for 11 yards. Keaton Mitchell had 2 carries for 10 yards. It's kind of crazy because I thought he had more carries than that. I mean, he certainly should have more moving forward, but
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of weird. Moving on to the receiving, Zay Flowers had 5 receptions for 58 yards. Devontae Walker had 1 reception for 30 yards. Derrick Henry had 2 receptions for 24 yards. D Hop had 2 receptions for 13 yards. Isaiah Likely had a catch for 10. Mark Andrews had 1 catch for 9. Keaton Mitchell had 1 catch for 9, and that's about it.
Yeah, so to move on to the Baltimore defense here, Roquan Smith led the day in tackles. He had 11 total tackles. Kyle Hamilton had 10. Teddy Buchanan had 8. I saw he got blown up on the screen. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
did
Mike Green
actually.
had 5 total tackles. He had 1 sack, a tackle for loss, and 2 QB hits. Travis Jones had 5 total tackles. He had a tackle for loss as well. Marlon Humphrey had 4 total tackles and a tackle for loss and a strip sack. I mean, in a strip, whatever, strip fumble, whatever. Draymond Jones had a great day. He had 4 total tackles, 1.5 sacks. He had 1 tackle for loss, a pass deflection, and 2 QB hits. Malachi Starks had 4 total tackles. TJ Tampa had 2, and he had a pass deflection and an interception. Nate Wiggins had 2 total tackles as well. John Jenkins had 2 total tackles. Trent Simpson had 2 total tackles, and Chandler Martin and everybody else had 1. Trent Simpson had that one play where he got he got pushed down by Tyrod Taylor. That was kind of embarrassing.
But yeah.
Anyways, the Jets had 15 first downs to our 16. They had 10 passing first downs to our 7. They had 5 rushing first downs to our 6. They had none from penalties and we had 3. They were 4 for 11 on third down and we were 2 for 11. They were 0 for 2 on fourth down and we were 2 for 2. They ran 57 total plays to our 58. They had 282 total yards to our 241. They had 10 drives, we had 11. They averaged 4.9 yards per play, we averaged 4.2. They had 78 rushing yards to our 98. They had 6 penalties for 81 yards. We had 5 for 30. They had 2 turnovers. We had none. They held the ball for 28 minutes and 13 seconds. We held the ball for 31 minutes and 47 seconds. So
Sorry, guys, if you can hear my cat in the background there. I'm sorry about
you got third member on the channel.
that. But just a very, it is what it is stat line. I'm just grateful that the defense did their job. Once again, shout out to Draymond Jones. I almost called him Draymond Green. Shout out to
Yeah,
Draymond
earlier.
Jones. Shout out to Mike Green. And that Trent Simpson play was embarrassing. I mean, he couldn't catch Tyrod too. There was one play where he couldn't even talk him down. You know, that was just
I don't
embarrassing.
know why Tyrod Taylor looked like the most athletic person in that field. That's a quarterback position. That's
Oh, yeah, and another thing, it was annoying. We were letting AD Mitchell and Mechie dot. I mean, Mechie, he's pretty good, so I'll give him that. But like, we were letting the receivers dot us up for no reason. Like, it was just
yeah.
unnecessary. But you know, I think that's all we got for this video. Just a quick recap. The Jets game. We improved to 6-5, so our first time above 500 this season, and we gotta build upon that. When the AFC North, the Steelers lost too, so we are first. So we're in a good standing right now. We just gotta keep building on it, keep stacking the wins, and see where our O line takes us. But you got any last words for this video?
Nope.
Nope. Well, that's what we got for you guys today. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Comment down below what were your thoughts about the game. If you guys were there, let us know. Also, what was your favorite plays of the game? What surprised you? Make sure to tell us that